I will not pay for this circus. My father's words. David struck like a thunderclap, shattering the joyful atmosphere in the family's elegant dining room. He slammed his hand down on the mahogany table, making the Limoges porcelain plates my mother cherished rattle. His face was flushed, his eyes flashing with a fury I had never seen before. My mother Helen sat motionless, a forced smile frozen on her lips. My sister Madison was stunned with her fork suspended in midair. And Liam, my fiancé, the man I loved more than life itself, sat beside me, his face pale with shock and confusion. Only a few months ago, at this very dining table, my father had raised a champagne flute, his voice brimming with pride. He had promised me a dream wedding, an event worthy of our family's tradition. Yet now that dream was being ruthlessly crushed by him, and he was calling it a circus. It wasn't always like this. 3 years ago, I met Liam in a very Austin setting. I, a fledgling landscape architect trying to make a name for myself, had come to the South by Southwest SXSW Music Festival, not for the music, but to attend a seminar on sustainable public space design. Liam, a talented independent music producer, was performing an ambient set he had composed himself at a small stage tucked away in a garden I happened to wander into. His music was like a current blending perfectly with the surrounding green space. I was captivated. Our conversation started there about how space and sound can shape human emotion, and it lasted until the last of the festival staff began to clean up. Our relationship blossomed as naturally as the gardens I designed. He was my rock when my startup struggled, and I helped him turn his small studio backyard into an inspiring green space, a creative sanctuary for local artists. We were a team building our lives and careers together. One autumn evening, Liam took me to the top of Mount Bonnell, one of the highest points in Austin, to watch the sunset over Lady Bird Lake. As the sky turned from brilliant orange to deep purple, he knelt. He didn't say much. Instead, he handed me a pair of headphones. A melodious piece composed just for me played. It was the sound of our Love Gentle complex and breathtakingly beautiful. The ring he gave me with his family's heirloom sapphire, set in a modern recycled platinum design, was the perfect symbol of the fusion of our past and future. When we announced the news, my family was overjoyed. My mother Helen hugged me, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. Madison immediately pulled out her phone to search for bachelorette party ideas. But it was my father's reaction that moved me the most. David, a man who was always stoic and reserved, clapped Liam on the shoulder with a genuine smile. "Welcome to the family, son," he said with a rare warmth. A few weeks later, during a formal celebratory dinner, my father stood to give a speech. To give away one's firstborn daughter is a father's honor and privilege. He said, his voice emotional. "As is family tradition, your mother and I will take care of everything. I will give you the most beautiful wedding a daughter could ever dream of." Those words opened an exciting chapter. With ample financial backing, we hired Evelyn Reed, a top Austin event planner, and began searching for the perfect venue. My dream was a property in the Texas Hill Country where the raw beauty of nature could serve as a backdrop for a refined landscape design. Everything seemed too perfect to be true. And perhaps it was. The first cracks appeared quietly. When I took my father to see my favorite venue, the Cypress Reserve, a stunning estate with ancient oak trees and sweeping views of the rolling hills, he seemed impatient. While Liam and I enthusiastically discussed the space's potential with the manager, my father kept glancing at his Rolex. "This place seems expensive," he muttered, as we walked through a meticulously manicured garden. "A hotel ballroom would be much more cost-effective." My unease grew during the first meeting with Evelyn, as I excitedly presented my color palette and ideas for an outdoor ceremony. My father repeatedly interrupted to steer the conversation toward costs. "How much does this floral arrangement cost?" he asked as I pointed to a centerpiece mock-up. "Is there a cheaper option for this type of lighting?" After Evelyn presented a preliminary plan, he frowned and made a cold remark. "All of this seems a bit much for one day, doesn't it?" I tried to diffuse the tension with a joke. "Well, hopefully it's just one day in a lifetime, Dad. Most people only plan on getting married once. Instead of smiling, he looked directly at me, his gaze sharp. Don't you think all of this is a bit excessive? So much money for a lavish party. It was the first time he had openly questioned the expense after his generous promise. My mother quickly changed the subject, but his words lingered in my mind, a dark cloud signaling an approaching storm. And now that storm had arrived. Sitting in the dead silence of the dining room, looking at my father's enraged face and Liam's pained eyes, I realized his harsh words weren't just about the cost of the wedding. It was deeper than that, and it was about to change everything. The silence enveloped the room, heavier and more suffocating than the sweltering heat of an Austin August afternoon. The soft hum of the wine fridge in the corner seemed to strain to pierce the wall of silence my father had just erected. Madison hastily set her fork down on her plate, its small clink sounding like a gunshot in the stillness. Liam was the first to break the silence. He cleared his throat, placing his napkin neatly beside his plate. "Mr. Miller," he began, his voice calm but with a noticeable tension. "I'm not sure I understand. We've been planning this together, with you and Mrs. Miller's blessing." My father ignored him, his eyes still fixed on me as if Liam were an invisible ghost. "You understand perfectly, Chloe. This whole charade, the Cypress Reserve Evelyn Reed with her celebrity client list, it's a performance. And for what? For him?" He jutted his chin toward Liam, a gesture of undisguised contempt. Anger began to simmer in my chest. "For us, Dad. This is our wedding. You were the one who talked about family tradition about giving me a dream wedding." "A wedding, not a venture capital investment," he snapped. He finally turned to Liam, his cold blue eyes narrowing. "Tell me something, Liam. An independent music producer in Austin. A very competitive field. What do you make in a year?" The question was a slap in the face. It was crude, invasive, and completely inappropriate. My mother let out a small gasp of protest, but one glare from my father silenced her. Liam, though stunned, maintained his composure. He sat up a little straighter. "Sir, with all due respect, I think our finances are a private matter between Chloe and me. We've discussed our future thoroughly and we're confident in it." "That's not an answer to my question," my father pressed, leaning forward. "I want numbers. Or are you counting on Chloe's income? Or perhaps on our money to fund your little studio?" "Dad, I couldn't take it anymore. You're embarrassing him, you're embarrassing me." "I'm being a responsible father," he retorted, his voice booming. "I did what any father would do. I did some research." "Research?" I repeated, a cold feeling spreading through my veins. "What do you mean by that?" A smug look crossed his face. "I know about the loans you had to take out to keep the studio afloat last year, Liam. I know your last big project just about broke even. You're not the successful entrepreneur you pretend to be. You're struggling." My world stopped spinning. It wasn't just an insult. It was a gross violation. My father, the man who had always taught me about integrity and respect, had secretly investigated the man I loved. He had dug into his life looking for weaknesses to weaponize. I looked at Liam. The composure on his face was gone, replaced by a look of deep hurt. He wasn't looking at my father, but at me, and in his eyes I saw shame and pain. That pain was worse than my father's rage. "You really did that," my voice trembled. "You hired someone to look into him." "We just want to protect you, darling." My mother finally spoke, her voice faint, trying to smooth things over. "Your father is just worried about your future." "Worried?" I let out a bitter laugh devoid of humor. "This isn't worry, Mom. This is control. This is the ultimate disrespect." I turned back to face my father, my anger giving me strength. "How dare you, Liam, is the kindest, most hardworking and talented person I know. He's built everything himself. Yes, he's struggled. What startup doesn't, but he never gives up. And he has never asked for anything from me or this family." "Men always put on a proud face, Chloe," my father sneered. "But I see right through him. He's targeting a family with means. Don't you see the pattern? He's after your money, or rather my money. That absurd accusation was the last straw. Liam slowly stood up, his composure returned, but it was cold and distant. I think it's best if I go, he said, his voice even. He didn't look at my parents. He only looked at me, and his eyes conveyed everything he couldn't say. I'll wait for you at home. He turned and walked out of the dining room without another word. The sound of the front door closing behind him was like a final punctuation mark on this tragic evening. I stood there trembling with anger and hurt. I looked at my parents, the two people I once thought would always be there for me unconditionally. You've ruined everything, I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. Not because of the money, but because of your pride and prejudice. I turned and left, ignoring my mother's calls behind me. As I walked out of the house where I grew up, I felt like I was leaving not just a bad dinner, but a version of my life, a version where a family's love was a safe harbor. Tonight that harbor had crumbled, and I knew that whether the wedding happened or not, my relationship with my parents would never be the same. A cold April drizzle began to fall as I drove down the Mopac Expressway, the droplets streaking across the windshield, blurring the neon lights of the city. At every red light, every stop, the dinner scene replayed in my head like a broken film. My father's voice, Liam's hurt eyes, my mother's complicit silence. The feeling of betrayal was more painful than the anger. The house in Westlake Hills where I grew up no longer felt like home. It was just a beautiful but cold architectural structure filled with tarnished memories. The place that truly felt like home was the cozy little apartment in South Congress that Liam and I rented together. When I walked in, a soft yellow light cast from the living room. Liam was sitting on the sofa, not watching TV, not listening to music, just sitting there in silence, an untouched glass of whiskey on the coffee table in front of him. He looked up as I entered, and the worry on his face was immediately replaced by relief at the sight of me. He said nothing, just stood up and pulled me into his arms. I buried my face in his shoulder, finally letting the pent-up tears flow. I sobbed for the ruined evening, for the broken promise, and for my naivety in believing that family love was unconditional. Liam just held me quietly, his hand gently stroking my hair, his presence a steadying balm. I'm sorry I left you there, he whispered after a long while. Don't. I looked up, meeting his eyes. You did the right thing. I'm the one who should be sorry. I'm sorry for what my father said, for what he did. It's not your fault, Chloe, he said, his voice gentle but firm. And he's partly right. The studio is struggling. I had to take out a loan to get through last year. I don't care, Liam, I interrupted. I don't care about the numbers. I care that my father invaded your privacy, insulted you, and turned our love into a business transaction. He had no right to do that. We sat down, and I told him everything, including how I had walked out. When I finished, he took my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. So what do we do now? He asked. Looking into his eyes, the answer suddenly became clear. The dream of a lavish wedding at the Cypress Reserve had vanished, but the dream of becoming his wife had not. On the contrary, it had grown even stronger. We're getting married, I said, a new sense of determination rising. Not my parents' wedding, ours. A small smile played on Liam's lips. I like the sound of that, but how we'll lose the deposit at the Cypress Reserve? Let it go, I replied. It's his money. I don't want a single penny of it anymore. We can have a small ceremony at Zilker Park, right in the botanical garden where we had our third date. Just our closest friends, the people who truly love and support us. The idea, simple and sincere, was like a breath of fresh air. A wedding not for show, but to celebrate love. A new beginning entirely ours. The next morning, with a hot cup of coffee in hand and Liam by my side, I called the Cypress Reserve. My heart was heavy as I prepared to give up my dream venue and lose the $5,000 deposit. A man with a deep, warm voice answered the phone. The Cypress Reserve, Caldwell speaking. Hello, Mr. Caldwell. This is Chloe Miller. I'm calling about my wedding reservation for October 14th. Ms. Miller, a pleasure to hear from you. What can we do for your plans today? He asked cheerfully. I took a deep breath. Actually, I'm calling to cancel. Due to some changing family circumstances, we won't be able to hold the event at the Cypress Reserve anymore. There was a short pause on the other end. I steeled myself for a cold professional tone and informing me that I would forfeit the deposit as per the contract. But instead, Mr. Caldwell's voice softened with concern. I'm very sorry to hear that. May I ask what happened? Perhaps we can find a solution. His genuine concern touched me. Unexpectedly, I found myself sharing part of the story. My parents were financing the wedding, but they've withdrawn their support. They disapprove of my fiancé's financial situation. Another pause, this one longer. I see, Mr. Caldwell finally said, his tone now different, more personal. If you don't mind my asking, do you and your fiancé still want to get married? Of course, I answered without hesitation. More than anything, we're just going to have a smaller ceremony somewhere else, somewhere we can afford. Ms. Miller, Mr. Caldwell said, a slight hesitation in his voice. I'm going to do something I've never done before. The Cypress Reserve will be refunding your deposit in full. I was stunned. What? But the contract says it's non-refundable. I own the place and I make the rules, he said, and I could hear a slight smile in his voice. But that's not all. I'd like to offer you and Liam our Oak Grove package at a minimal cost. No profit, just enough to cover our staff and operational expenses. I was completely speechless. Mr. Caldwell, that's incredible. Why would you do that? Because 25 years ago, he began, I was in your fiancé's shoes. I was a young broke chef in love with the daughter of a wealthy oil investor. Her father thought I wasn't good enough. He did everything he could to break us up. His voice held a distant memory. We ended up eloping, and I spent my life proving him wrong. The Cypress Reserve is that proof. His story left me choked with emotion. I believe in real love, Ms. Miller, not marriages based on financial statements. And I saw that in you two when you toured the place. The joy on your faces was real. After a quick whispered consultation with Liam, who was equally astounded, we accepted his extraordinary offer. The wedding was back on in a way that felt even more meaningful than before. What about the refund? I asked. Will you send it back to my father? Yes, Mr. Caldwell confirmed. On one condition. I will personally call him to explain that while his money is being returned, the wedding at the Cypress Reserve is still happening. I won't mention the discount, of course, just that we've come to a different direct arrangement with you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why would you do that? Because sometimes, he said, his voice now firm, the best way to deal with a bully who uses money to control people is to show them that their money has no power here. When I hung up the phone, a feeling of elation coursed through me. We not only had our dream wedding back, but we had an unexpected ally. Liam wrapped me in a hug, his face beaming. We had taken back control. But I knew Mr. Caldwell's call to my father wouldn't just be an announcement. It would be a declaration of war. And the battle had only just begun. As predicted, the fallout from Mr. Caldwell's call was almost immediate. Less than an hour later, my phone rang, the name Dad, flashing on the screen with a menacing glow. I looked at Liam, took a deep breath to steady myself, and answered, What have you done? My father's voice came through, no greeting, just cold fury. Good morning to you too, Dad, I replied, trying to keep my voice as level as possible. Don't you get smart with me, Chloe. Why did the owner of the Cypress Reserve just call me? What did you tell him? I told him the truth, I answered, that you were no longer funding our wedding. The decision after that was his. He said he's refunding the deposit, but that your wedding is still on. How is that possible? What game are you playing? His voice was thick with suspicion and rage. There's no game, Dad. Liam and I are getting married at the Cypress Reserve, just not on your dime. That's ridiculous, he scoffed. You can't afford that place. What did you say about us to get this special treatment? His voice dropped dangerously low. You are embarrassing this family. No, Dad. You embarrassed yourself. I said, my voice now just as cold. when you decided that a person's worth could be measured by their bank account. I hung up before he could reply. My hand was shaking, but inside I felt a solid core of resolve. Liam, who had heard the entire exchange, pulled me into a hug. "Are you okay?" I nodded against his chest. "More than okay. For the first time in all of this, I feel like we're actually in control." But control was a fragile concept. The next morning, just as Liam was leaving for the studio, the doorbell to our apartment rang. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway. My father looked like a ticking time bomb, and my mother stood slightly behind him, her expression a mixture of anxiety and anger. I opened the door but blocked the entrance, making no move to invite them in. "We need to talk," my father said flatly, his tone a command. "I think we said everything that needed to be said the other night and on the phone yesterday," I replied, crossing my arms. "Chloe, please," my mother interjected. "This has gone too far." I reluctantly stepped back, letting them into our modest living space. My father immediately began pacing the small living room, his eyes scanning the local art Liam had hung on the walls, the furniture I had refurbished myself. Every detail seemed to be evidence of my unsuitable choices in his eyes. "What exactly did you say to that man from the Cypress Reserve?" he demanded, whirling to face me. "He was incredibly rude on the phone, as if we'd done something wrong by you." "I told him the truth," I repeated, my voice even, "that you withdrew your financial support because you disapproved of Liam's income." "You're making us look terrible in front of strangers," my father cried, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that call was? He all but accused me of trying to buy my daughter a different husband." "And isn't that exactly what you were trying to do?" I challenged. "You told me in no uncertain terms to find someone who could afford me, as if I were a luxury item and not a person with a heart and a mind of my own." My mother stepped forward. "Chloe, you're twisting our words. We just want what's best for you." "No," I countered firmly. "You want what you think is best for me. There's a big difference." Before my mother could respond, the apartment door opened and Liam walked in, stopping short when he saw my parents. The surprise on his face was quickly replaced by resolve as he came to stand beside me. "David, Helen." He nodded to them. "I came back for some paperwork, but I'm glad you're here. We should clear the air." My father turned on Liam, his posture aggressive. "You have turned my daughter against us." Liam remained calm. "I haven't done anything. Chloe makes her own decisions. She always has. It's one of the many reasons I love her." "You're manipulating her," my father insisted, "making her choose between her family and you." "No, sir," Liam replied firmly. "You did that when you investigated me without my knowledge and then tried to cancel our wedding based on your findings. Chloe and I are planning a life together. You're the one who issued the ultimatum." My mother looked uncomfortable. "We were just trying to protect her from—" "From what?" Liam asked. "From a man who loves her more than anything, who supports her dreams and ambitions, who would never ask her to be anyone other than who she is." For the first time, I saw my mother truly look at Liam, seeing past the prejudices and my father's influence. "My family has known financial hardship," Liam continued, addressing the unspoken accusation hanging between them. "My father made some bad investments and we lost almost everything. But you know what that taught me? The value of hard work, resilience, and that money does not define a person's worth. I have built my life back from scratch. My studio may not be turning a massive profit yet, but it's growing every year. I have never taken a handout, and I'm certainly not with Chloe for her family's money." As Liam was speaking, the apartment door opened once again, startling all of us. Mr. Caldwell stood in the doorway, looking slightly flustered. "I am so sorry to interrupt," he said. "The building manager let me in. I was just stopping by to drop off some revised paperwork for Chloe and Liam, but I can come back." My father stared at Mr. Caldwell in disbelief. What are you doing here?" Mr. Caldwell drew himself up, extending a hand to my father. "Mr. Miller, I believe we spoke on the phone yesterday. I'm Vincent Caldwell, owner of the Cypress Reserve." My father ignored the outstretched hand. "I know who you are. What I don't understand is why you're meddling in my family's business. The confrontation was no longer just between us and my parents. It had escalated into a public showdown with a stranger suddenly serving as the arbiter of our family war, and I had a feeling that what Mr. Caldwell was about to say would change the entire dynamic of that war. Mr. Caldwell lowered his hand when it was ignored, but his dignified demeanor didn't falter. "I have no intention of meddling," he said, his voice calm and respectful. But when Ms. Miller called to cancel her wedding, something in her story resonated with me on a deep level. "This is completely unprofessional," my father growled. "Perhaps," Mr. Caldwell conceded, "but sometimes human compassion overrides business protocol." He took in all of us with his gaze. "May I share something with you, Mr. Miller?" Without waiting for permission, he continued. 25 years ago, I was in Liam's position. I was in love with a woman whose parents felt I was beneath their family's station. Her father was a successful oil investor, while I was just a young chef with more dreams than dollars in my pocket. My father's face remained stone-like, but he didn't interrupt. Her parents did everything they could to drive us apart, Mr. Caldwell went on. They investigated my finances, criticized my ambitions, even tried to set her up with more suitable men. Sound familiar? My mother shifted uncomfortably while my father's jaw tightened. "We got married anyway," Mr. Caldwell said with a gentle smile, "against their wishes with just a few close friends. Her parents refused to come. They didn't speak to us for 2 years. "Is there a point to this story?" my father asked curtly. "Yes," Mr. Caldwell replied. 2 years after our wedding, her father had a heart attack. Despite everything, my wife rushed to his side. During his recovery, he got to know me. The real me, not just a bank statement. He saw how happy his daughter was, how hard I worked, and how much we loved each other. Mr. Caldwell's gaze was fixed on my father. Before he passed away 10 years later, he told me that his biggest regret was missing our wedding and wasting 2 years of a relationship over his own pride and prejudice. The room fell silent as Mr. Caldwell's words hung in the air. After a moment, he continued, his voice softer. "Mr. Miller, I see a lot of myself in Liam, and frankly, a lot of my father-in-law in you. You're a successful man who has worked hard to provide for his family. You want to protect your daughter from hardship. That comes from a place of love, even if your actions may have been misguided." To my astonishment, my father didn't immediately dismiss Mr. Caldwell's words. Instead, he slowly sat down on our sofa, suddenly looking older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. "I just wanted her to have an easier life than I did," he said quietly, almost to himself. "When I was starting out, Diana and I struggled. There were nights we couldn't afford to pay for heating times we had to choose between getting medicine for Chloe and paying the rent." I looked at my father, stunned. He had never shared these details of their early life before. "I promised myself my daughter would never know that kind of worry," he continued. "Never have to count pennies or lie awake at night wondering how to make ends meet." My mother moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. "We just wanted to protect you from the struggles we faced," she said, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. For the first time, I understood their perspective, even if I didn't agree with their methods. Their fear wasn't born of malice, but from the scars of their own past. "Dad, Mom," I said, my voice softening, "I appreciate that you wanted to shield me from hardship, but trying to control who I love isn't protection. It's possession." Liam knelt in front of my parents, a gesture that was both humble and resolute. "I can't promise that we will never face financial difficulties. No one can predict the future, but I can promise that I will always put Chloe's happiness and well-being first. We will face whatever comes together as partners." My father looked at Liam for a long time, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. He wasn't seeing a bank statement or a business loan, but a young man with integrity and a deep love for his daughter. "You really love her that much?" my father asked, his voice cracking. "Enough to stand up to her angry father and hold your ground." Liam nodded without hesitation. "I would face anything for her." Something shifted in my father's expression, a subtle softening around his eyes. "I was wrong about you," He admitted the words clearly difficult for him to say. And I was wrong about how I handled this. Mr. Caldwell, who had been watching quietly, smiled gently. It takes a strong man to admit when he's wrong, Mr. Miller. Stronger than one who never makes a mistake. My father stood and offered his hand to Liam, who rose to shake it. I can't promise I won't worry about my daughter's future, my father said. That's a father's prerogative, but I can promise to respect your relationship and support your marriage. The tension that had filled our small apartment began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile hope. My mother wiped her tears and gave me a tight hug. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, she whispered. We got so caught up in our own fears that we forgot what really mattered, your happiness. As Mr. Caldwell prepared to leave, having witnessed the beginning of our reconciliation, my father stopped him. Thank you, he said simply, for sharing your story and for giving my daughter and future son-in-law a chance when I failed to. Mr. Caldwell gave a nod of acknowledgement. Sometimes we all need a reminder of what's truly important in life. It's never the size of a bank account or the prestige of a job title. It's always the love we give and receive. As the door closed behind Mr. Caldwell, I looked around at my parents and Liam, feeling as though we had all just weathered a terrible storm and come out the other side, a little battered but intact. There was still hurt to be healed, trust to be rebuilt. But the foundation for reconciliation had been laid thanks to the unexpected intervention of a stranger who recognized in our story the echoes of his own past. The following weeks were like walking on a delicate suspension bridge over a deep canyon. Reconciliation had begun, but trust like that bridge needed to be reinforced one cable at a time. Conversations became tentative and careful. Old habits and knee-jerk reactions were hard to erase overnight. The first phone call from my father after the confrontation was a case in point. He called to ask about the wedding plans. So, have you decided on a menu? He asked, his voice slightly forced. For a moment, my old instincts flared up, ready to be defensive, assuming he was trying to interfere again. But then I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the breakthrough we had made. We're thinking of having food stations, Dad. A sort of Austin Street food vibe to reflect how we met. I waited for the objection, a comment about it being undignified. Instead, after a pause, he just said, Sounds interesting. Send me the menu when you have it. Just out of curiosity. It was a small step, but it was significant. He was showing interest instead of imposing control. Liam and I decided to meet with Evelyn Reed, the wedding planner, again. We felt we owed her an explanation, and wanted to see if she'd be willing to work with a more modest budget and a completely new family dynamic. We sat in her chic downtown office feeling a little out of place compared to our first visit. That's quite a story, she said after we had finished, her eyes showing a mixture of sympathy and intrigue. In my 20 years in this business, I've seen every kind of family drama. But yours has a twist I've never seen. She smiled. And frankly, a wedding built on honesty and real love instead of family obligation always turns out to be the most beautiful. I would be honored to help you. Let's consider it a creative challenge. With Evelyn and Mr. Caldwell on our side, wedding planning became a joyful and collaborative process. We kept the Cypress Reserve, but instead of a lavish ballroom reception, we opted for Mr. Caldwell's Oak Grove, an intimate outdoor space under a canopy of ancient oaks lit by strings of twinkling lights. My parents gradually became involved, but in a different way. My mother, with her keen eye for aesthetics, helped me select fabrics for the table linens, not as a sponsor, but as a mother sharing in her daughter's joy. My father surprisingly took the time to visit Liam's studio. I wasn't there for it, and Liam said it was tense at first. My father walked around the studio examining the equipment, asking sharp questions about the business model. But then Liam played some of the music he was producing for an up-and-coming local indie band. The music changed everything. My father, who I always thought only listened to classical and jazz, listened in silence. You've got a talent, he admitted when the track finished. I don't understand much about this kind of music, but I can hear the quality in it. It was the highest praise Liam could have received from him. Before he left, My father pointed to a small crack in the wall of the soundproof booth. You should get that fixed. It could be affecting your acoustics. It wasn't a criticism, but a piece of practical advice. His own clumsy way of showing he cared. One evening, my parents invited us over for dinner. The atmosphere was completely different from that fateful night. It was quieter, more reserved, but also more genuine. During the meal, my father set down his fork. I've been talking to my lawyer, he announced, and my heart skipped a beat. I want to set up a trust for you, Chloe, and for Madison, too. It's your money to do with whatever you wish: buy a house, invest in a business, travel the world. No strings attached. It will be yours completely. He looked at Liam. And Liam, I'd like to make an offer to invest in your studio. Not as a gift, but as a business investment. I've looked at your books, and I see potential there. I believe in what you're building. Liam and I looked at each other stunned. This wasn't an attempt to buy back control. This was an act of reparation. It was my father's way as a true businessman of saying sorry and showing his faith. Dad, I don't know what to say, I stammered. You don't have to say anything. He said, his voice tinged with emotion. I spent so much time trying to build a secure future for you that I forgot to let you build your own. I just want to be a part of it if you'll let me. That night, driving home, Liam took my hand. Your father is a complicated man, he said, but I think I'm starting to understand him. Me too, I admitted. Me too. The bridge between us and my parents was no longer fragile. It was being rebuilt stronger with new materials, respect, understanding, and a more mature form of love. The upcoming wedding was no longer the focus of a battle. It had become a symbol of the peace we had all fought so hard to achieve. October draped the Texas hill country in a tapestry of ochre and burnt orange. The air was crisp and dry, a welcome respite from the summer heat. Our wedding day arrived not with the loud fanfare we had once planned, but with a quiet and profound sense of meaning. The cypress reserve under Mr. Caldwell's care had transformed the oak grove into a magical space. Warm, golden Edison bulbs were strung between the ancient oak branches, creating a glittering canopy of light. The aisle was scattered with cream-colored rose petals and dry maple leaves. Instead of a string quartet, we had a gifted classical guitarist, a friend of Liam's, playing soulful melodies that mingled with the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. I stood with my father at the head of the aisle, my hand tucked into the crook of his arm. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo and looked dashing, but the rigid, controlling set of his face was gone. Instead, there was a softness in his eyes as he looked at me. You look beautiful, Chloe, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I am so sorry I almost ruined this for you. I squeezed his arm gently. But you didn't. In a strange way, what happened made today more meaningful. We're all here out of choice and love, not obligation. As the guitar music shifted to the familiar melody of the song Liam had composed for me on the day he proposed, we began our walk. And then I saw him waiting for me under the most beautifully decorated oak arch. He wore a dapper navy blue suit, and the smile on his face could have lit up the Texas night sky. His eyes were only for me, filled with love and promise. Our journey to this moment had been tumultuous, but we had emerged stronger both as a couple and as part of a reshaped family. The ceremony was simple but profound. Our officiant was a mutual friend, and instead of traditional vows, we wrote our own. Liam spoke of how I had brought color and texture to his world of sound, and he promised to always be my safe harbor to listen for the rhythm of my heart, even in the quietest moments. When it was my turn, I looked into his eyes and then glanced at my parents sitting in the front row. I used to think love was a perfect blueprint, a meticulously drawn-out plan, I began. But you've taught me that true love is more like a wild garden. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes full of thorns, but it is also resilient, vibrant, and astonishingly beautiful. I promise to tend our garden with you, to face the storms as well as the sunny days, to always find the beauty in our imperfect growth. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the applause from our 75 guests, the people who were truly our inner circle, felt like a healing balm. At the reception held right there in the Oak Grove, with food stations serving everything from smoked brisket tacos to lavender macarons, my father asked for the microphone for a toast. I felt a flicker of anxiety, wondering what he would say, but Liam squeezed my hand reassuringly. My father cleared his throat, looking out at the assembled guests, many of whom were blissfully unaware of the drama that had preceded this day. When my daughter was born, he began, I made a silent promise to protect her from all hardship and pain. As she grew up, I thought I knew what was best for her, what would make her happy and secure. He paused, his eyes finding mine. I was wrong. A murmur went through the crowd at this unexpected admission. I almost lost my daughter because I couldn't see past my own fears and prejudices, he continued. I thought love was about control and protection, but Chloe and Liam have taught me that real love is about trust and acceptance. He raised his glass to us. To my daughter and my new son, thank you for your forgiveness and for teaching this old man that happiness cannot be bought or planned, but only recognized and cherished when it arrives. May your marriage be filled with the wisdom and compassion you've shown this imperfect father of yours. Tears streamed down my face as I hugged him, feeling the final walls between us crumble. My mother joined our embrace, whispering her own apologies and love into my ear. Later, as the band kicked into a lively tune and people started to dance, Mr. Caldwell found us 2 glasses of champagne in hand. Congratulations, you two, he said with a warm smile. This is one of the most beautiful weddings we've ever hosted. It's all because of you, Liam said. We can never thank you enough. Mr. Caldwell shook his head. Don't thank me. Thank your love. It was strong enough to change a stubborn man's mind. And believe me, I know how hard that can be. He winked. Now go dance with your wife, young man. This night is yours. As Liam pulled me onto the dance floor under the Texas stars and the twinkling lights, I felt a complete sense of peace. We had fought for this day for our love, and we had won not by defeating anyone, but by finding a way to heal together. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a hopeful beginning built on a foundation of truth, forgiveness, and the resilient power of love. Life after the wedding wasn't an immediate cascade of serene days. Mending a deeply fractured relationship is like tending a garden after a major storm. You have to clear away the broken branches till the soil and patiently wait for new growth. Sunday evenings at my parents' house, once a source of tension, became a slow ritual of healing. At first, conversations were still a bit stilted. We avoided sensitive topics like money or future plans, talking instead about the weather, the University of Texas Longhorns football team, or my sister Madison's latest projects at college. Madison, who had been caught in the crossfire, began to open up. One evening, when it was just the 2 of us in the kitchen, she confessed, I was so scared, Chloe. I could see Dad was making a mistake, but I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was betraying one of you if I spoke up. You weren't betraying anyone, I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. You were just a kid caught between complicated adults. The important thing is that we're okay now. The biggest and most surprising change was the burgeoning relationship between my father and Liam. My father's investment in the studio wasn't just a financial transaction. It became a bridge. My father, with his sharp business mind, began to take a genuine interest in the music industry. He read trade magazines asking Liam about streaming trends and music royalties. Liam, instead of feeling scrutinized, found an unlikely mentor in my father. They started having their own meetings without me or my mother. They would sit in my father's office poring over numbers and spreadsheets, discussing expansion strategies and business plans. Your dad is really smart, Liam told me one night after coming home. He pointed out a few weaknesses in my plan that I never would have seen. He's not trying to control, he's actually helping. Slowly they found a common language, a mutual respect built on competence and hard work. My father began to see Liam not as the musician guy, but as an ambitious young entrepreneur. And Liam began to see my father not as an overbearing patriarch, but as a man who had built his empire from scratch and had valuable lessons to share. Another turning point came from an unexpected source. Liam's parents, who lived in a small town in East Texas, came to Austin to visit us a few months after the wedding. I was nervous about the first meeting between the two sets of parents since the peace had been established. Liam's parents were simple, kind people, the complete opposite of my parents' polished world. We had a barbecue in my parents' backyard. At first, the atmosphere was a little awkward, but then Liam's father, a retired carpenter, started talking to my father about wood. He admired the new outdoor dining table my father had bought, and they launched into a half-hour-long animated conversation about types of oak and joinery techniques. Meanwhile, my mother and Liam's mother found common ground in their gardens. My mother, with her professionally manicured beds, was fascinated by Liam's mom's knowledge of native herbs and organic vegetable gardening. As the sun set, I saw a scene I never thought I would witness: my father and Liam's father laughing together by the grill, while my mother and Liam's mother were exchanging gardening tips beside the rose bushes. There was no talk of social status or finances, just four parents connecting over their love for their children and surprising shared interests. That night, as we walked Liam's parents to their car, his mother gave me a tight hug. "Your parents are good people, Chloe," she said. "Sometimes the people who have the most are the most afraid of losing it." Her words were profound. They helped me understand the root of my parents' actions. Their fear wasn't about Liam, it was about their own past, their obsession with protecting me from the struggles they had endured. As we drove home in comfortable silence, I realized that the rebuilding wasn't just happening within the Miller family. We were building a new, larger family, a network of relationships woven not from perfection, but from accepting flaws and finding beauty in unexpected common ground. Our garden was growing, its branches reaching out in new and surprising directions. 6 months after the wedding, on a sunny Saturday morning, Liam and I were sitting at our favorite coffee shop on South Congress, sketching ideas on napkins. Liam's studio, with my father's investment and strategic mentorship, was thriving. He had just signed a deal to produce for a rising country singer, and his workspace was starting to feel cramped. "I need a bigger space," he said, drawing a rough floor plan. "A place with a larger main studio and maybe a few smaller rooms for independent artists to rent. And most importantly, an outdoor space where they can relax and find inspiration." A creative garden, I said, my eyes lighting up. A place where music and nature can intersect. And just like that, an idea was born. It was bold and ambitious, not just to move the studio, but to build a whole new creative hub. A space that combined state-of-the-art recording studios with a landscaped garden designed to foster creativity and collaboration. We called it Project Green Echo. When we presented the idea to my parents at Sunday dinner, I braced myself for my father's skepticism. This was a major undertaking requiring a significant investment, but instead of frowning, he leaned forward, his eyes glinting with interest. "A commercial property with a unique design element," he said, his business brain instantly analyzing. "An interesting business model. The Austin market is lacking spaces like that. Let me see your business plan." Suddenly, our family dynamic had morphed into a business partnership. My father became the lead investor and advisor on the project. My mother, with her aesthetic eye, got involved in selecting interior finishes. I was in charge of the entire landscape architecture and outdoor space design, while Liam oversaw the design and construction of the studios. It was a challenging process. There were disagreements. My father wanted to focus on cost-effectiveness, while Liam and I prioritized the artist's experience. There were heated debates over building materials and contractors. But this time the arguments were different. They weren't personal. We weren't fighting for control, but for the best solution for the project. My father learned to listen and respect my expertise in my field. I learned to appreciate his financial acumen and practical experience. We found the perfect property in East Austin, a rapidly gentrifying area with a vibrant arts community. It was a rundown warehouse, but it had good bones and a large, neglected backyard. For nearly a year, we poured our sweat, effort, and hearts into Project Green Echo. I designed a garden with meandering paths, quiet seating areas, tucked under vine-covered pergolas, a small outdoor stage for acoustic performances, and even a small organic vegetable garden for the artist to use. Liam worked with top acoustical engineers to create studios with pristine sound quality. My father was on site almost every day wearing a hard hat, poring over blueprints and talking to contractors. I would often find him and Liam standing together, heads bowed, over an architectural drawing deep in a respectful but intense debate. They had become a team. One afternoon, as the project was nearing completion, my mother hosted a special dinner at their house. She brought out a bottle of fine champagne. "We have an announcement," my father said, looking more relaxed and happy than I had seen him in years. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of reflecting on our own journey." My mother smiled, taking his hand. "We realized that in our efforts to give you a better life than we had, we forgot to tell you about the beauty of our early struggles, how they strengthened our bond, and taught us what was truly important. So we've decided to renew our vows," my father continued. "A simple ceremony celebrating not just the comfortable life we've built, but the difficult beginnings that made us who we are. And we would be honored if you and Liam would help us plan it." The request, a complete reversal of the control dynamic that had caused so much pain, brought tears to my eyes. I looked at Liam, and he nodded, his smile as warm as mine. "We would love to," I replied, feeling his supportive hand on my shoulder. Project Green Echo wasn't just a building of brick and mortar. It was the physical manifestation of our family's rebirth. From the ashes of control and misunderstanding, we had built something new, beautiful, and lasting together. We had learned to turn disagreements into collaboration, and the scars of the past into the foundation for a stronger future. A year to the day after my wedding, as I stood in the completed garden of Green Echo, a deep sense of fulfillment washed over me. Laughter and soft music drifted from the grand opening party we were hosting. Artists, producers, friends, and family meandered along the cobblestone paths I had designed, sat on the benches I had chosen, and admired the space that had once been just a dream on a napkin. Project Green Echo was a success beyond our wildest dreams. It was quickly becoming a sought-after creative hub in Austin, a place where artists felt inspired and supported. But for me, its greatest success wasn't in the revenue numbers, but in what it represented. I watched my father in animated conversation with a young music producer, sharing business advice with genuine enthusiasm. My mother was showing Liam's mom how to prune the rosemary in the herb garden. They had become true friends. Liam came to my side, slipping his arm around my waist and resting his hand on my stomach, where a tiny new life was beginning to form. "What are you thinking about?" he whispered. "I'm thinking about gardens," I replied, leaning my head against his shoulder. "About how you have to break up the old soil, pull out the weeds, and start fresh for something new to grow. Our family is like that." He kissed the top of my head. "You're the best landscape architect I know, both in the world and in the heart." Later that evening, when most of the guests had left, our family sat together in a quiet corner of the garden under the twinkling lights. It was the night before my parents' 35th anniversary and their vow renewal. "Thank you for helping us plan this," my mother said, her eyes sparkling. "It's going to be so simple, just us at the little chapel where we were married." "It's our honor," Liam said. My father looked at me and Liam, then down at my belly. A rare, gentle smile spread across his face. "When I look at all this," he said, his voice thoughtful, "Green Echo, your marriage, my coming grandchild, I realize something. I tried so hard to protect you from struggle, Chloe. But it was the struggle, our struggle to understand each other, to forgive each other, to rebuild trust, that truly made us. Security isn't in avoiding the storm, but in learning to weather it together." His words, filled with a hard-won wisdom and humility, were the greatest gift he could have given me. The next day, in a tiny historic chapel, I watched my parents renew their vows. They didn't speak of their years of wealth and success. They spoke of the sleepless nights of worry, of sharing the last piece of bread, of finding strength in their love when they had nothing else. They were honoring their scars, turning them into a testament to their resilience. As I sat there hand in hand with Liam, I reflected on the journey we had all taken. I had learned that sometimes the people who love us the most can hurt us the most deeply often because their own fears eclipse our strengths. I had discovered that standing up for your own truth, even when it's painful, ultimately creates more authentic relationships than submission ever could. And most importantly, I realized that true family bonds aren't about control or conditions, but about growing through conflict and forgiveness, allowing each member the dignity of their own path while offering support instead of direction. Looking at my parents now, a couple reconnected by a new honesty, and at the husband beside me, my true partner through every storm, and feeling the life growing inside me, I knew our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated, and real. And it was more beautiful than any dream wedding I could have ever imagined. Because it was ours, built not on empty promises, but from the ashes of a conflict and cultivated by the resilient power of a love that could learn to bend to heal and finally to bloom in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. The circle was complete not by returning to where it began, but by creating a new, larger, and stronger one for all of us.